So QA is much more than just finding bugs. It's actually, our job is actually to ensure that the product that we are testing meets the requirements and the acceptance criteria that are set usually by the product owner or the client. We focus on the quality, the security, and also we have the user perspective, so that's really important. And this is also really important to mention that there isn't a bug-free system, so we are not leaning to perfection, we are just reducing risk. Okay, so developers and QAs have different perspectives. So developers usually test what they build, and we test how it's built. So that's the main difference, because yes, we have the user perspective. But developers' tests are always and will be really important, because on every project you lean to have the full test pyramid, which includes the unit, the integration, the system, and the end-to-end tests. So you want to have the full coverage. And developers, yes, most developers, I wouldn't say all, usually covers only the happy path, but QA is there to cover the unhappy paths, the edge cases, and the user perspective. But it's really important to have both sides. So the unit and integration tests are the foundation of the test pyramid. And without developers' tests, I wouldn't say our tests are useful, but they're just not enough. So we should always aim to have full coverage, so from the developer side and the QA side.
But also I think it's very important that QA engineer understands the solution, just like a developer does. So they can basically decide and see in testing if there is an issue, or let's say something is expected but maybe looks a bit odd. So I think they should know the solution just as good as a developer. Maybe sometimes even better, because they test the complete application, so maybe the engineers know part of the solution, but I think QA should really be familiar with the complete solution.
So on most projects, QAs are integrated at the beginning. So we are included in the design, the requirement analysis, and of course in continuously testing and automation. So we are not considered in DECODE like a checkbox. We are not considered like end of a pipeline. Our knowledge is considered valuable, and our input is really important, especially before releases. So yeah, we are included in almost most phases in DECODE during the development phase.
I think that we as designers, we don't always have a time to cover all the scenarios, and that's the time that QAs can help. So I think that we should involve them more in the early stages when we are defining the flows. They can help us to see the gaps, or if we are missing something. And later, of course, together with developers, we need to explain them our flows, each screen of our design, so that they fully understand the flows, and so that they can be able to test maybe another flow or another scenario that we didn't cover.
So you as a QA need to prioritize your testing. This is actually called risk-based testing, where you need to figure out what to test, how much to test, and especially if you're limited with time. So let's say you're testing the registration flow, for example, and of course you need to cover and the happy paths, some unhappy paths, but also some edge cases that might have an impact on that product or system. But you probably don't need to test each validation or error handling on each field. You can, but error message not showing correctly is not a bigger issue as user cannot register. So you need to be really careful not to take too much time on testing a certain feature, because everyone is actually waiting for you to finish. So this is really important, and like I said, this is called risk-based testing. And about when something is ready to go live, that actually depends if what you are testing actually met the requirements or the acceptance criteria, and how many critical issues are there. So that's on you to decide and see if it's ready or not. The risk-based testing is actually based on experience. So you, as a QA, over years develop experience of, especially on certain, because all systems have similar flows, all have login, register, payment, and you know which areas are fragile or which might break, so you focus on that. But when I encounter something new that I haven't tested before, I usually depend on acceptance criteria. And on acceptance criteria, it always should be defined what is critical and what is not. How does a system should work and not, and you focus on that. Okay, so automation is needed for, I would say, repeatable tests that are stable, but also critical test cases. So for example, login, register, APIs, payment, those are features that always need to work for the system to work. So if those features are not working, all other tests doesn't really matter. So you need to automate those type of tests, but what is unnecessary will probably be features that change a lot. So for example, if you have a feature that changes every week, having automated tests for that will require you as a QA to adjust the tests accordingly, or update locators or URLs, whatever. So that will probably take a lot of time and eventually money for you to do that. And it's, I wouldn't say useful, but useless, but basically it is. So yeah. So it's a calculation that depends actually on development. So if a developer needs 2 hours to finish, I don't know, the login flow, you need to calculate how much testing requires for that flow, and it's usually 30 to 40% of that task. So that's the calculation. That's like ideal. Sometimes if a feature is more complex, like payment, or more important, then sometimes even 50%. So it depends on the feature, but if, for example, if it's change a button, change a text, then it's probably just 10%. So that depends. So I'll start with creating a test strategy, which will actually include how are we going to test, which frameworks are we going to use, which tools, who is going to do the testing. I'm going to explain the testing pyramid, and I'll go into details of each segment. So I'm going to develop a test plan using any kind of test or bug tracking tool. I'm gonna make sure to use appropriate frameworks for automation based on the system I'm testing. And also I need to include probably project manager or developers to review the test strategy. Maybe they have a different input, or maybe some other ideas. How should we approach some other testing, like backend testing, security testing, penetration testing, stress testing, or load testing, etc. That depends on the project. First, how much time do we have? Or do we even have time to do stress testing? Is it necessary? If, for example, we are building an app that won't have a lot of users, then it's really, I wouldn't say a good idea, but it's we don't have to do stress testing, but if it's a big platform with a lot of users, we have to do stress testing, and we need to figure out how are we going to do it. So yeah, that's actually depends on the project we are doing, but the template is always the same.
Edge cases, exploratory testing. How do you approach testing scenarios that aren't covered by requirements? Do you do that even?
Okay, so yes, we do that. We do exploratory testing, but only when we have, unfortunately, time. Exploratory testing is sometimes first thing you are going to do, sometimes, but usually functional test or feature test is something you are doing first. But for example, from my experience, I usually do exploratory testing when I have regression test automated, and then I have a lot of time to focus on other types of testing, like exploratory testing, accessibility testing, usability testing, etc. So those type of testings are really good to have, and they are not currently, they cannot be automated or even replaced by AI currently. So they are really important, yeah. Yes, we are tracking, of course, we are tracking metrics, but those metrics are usually integrated in the frameworks. For example, automation framework for Playwright, or if you're using any kind of test farm, source types, and browser stacks, or even if you're doing manual tests using TestRail, after finishing each of these tests, you'll get like metrics. So how many tests are passed, how much did the run last, and those metrics are important, especially for PMs or stakeholders. So usually focus is on how many tests did pass or failed. Those are the most important metrics we do. And sometimes we measure regression. So how many times did a bug repeatedly came back? So that's actually a good metric. Not good for developers, but good for us and project lead and stakeholders. Because if a certain issue keeps coming back, then we are going to test that area better and include in our automated test suite. When I started working as a QA, I only did manual testing, and we tested it in Excel and spreadsheets, and that was awful, and testing took like 2 weeks. And now we are using bug tracking tools, we are using automation, we are using AI. So for example, just using AI, I can generate a test strategy, a test plan in just a couple of minutes. Okay, I'll probably do need to tweak that a little bit, but I have a lot of time to focus on some other things like exploratory testing, accessibility testing. So it's with the sequence of tools we are now having today, I think that it's pretty, I wouldn't say easy to be a QA, but you have a lot of room to improve the quality of your product in much better way than 10 years ago.
Have you ever introduced a new tool or something, a process that significantly improved something or on the project? Do you have a story behind it? If not, it's fine.
Well, we did migrate from Selenium to Playwright on one project. And the reason we did that is because our tests, the tests we had were pretty flaky and not really reliable. There were a lot of false positive failures, and we were searching for a solution, and we migrated from Selenium to Playwright, as I said, and that was like a lifesaver for us because we spent a lot of time fixing tests and sometimes even doing manual checks because our automated suite was useless. And after switching to Playwright, I wouldn't say all of our problems stopped, but tests are now really fast, not flaky at all, and we actually have a lot of, I wouldn't say free time, but we can now focus on other things because our regression suite is now working as expected. And yeah, that really boosts our processes. Yeah, so as you said, so there is no bug-free software. It doesn't exist. So I would say that we cannot lean to perfection. We can just reduce risks. We can help build a software that is stable, that doesn't have any critical issues, but we cannot build something that will, I wouldn't say never break, but we will try to deliver a product that is user-friendly and can be used without any issues, but having no issues is just impossible. Like in everyday life, whatever you do, there are always issues everywhere. So it's impossible to have something perfect. That's impossible. So if someone doesn't understand this, I'm not sure how to explain it differently. I don't know. So I would say that don't look at or think that your QAs are like bug hunters, or they are more than that. Actually, they are your risk management partners. They are here to help you create a better software. You should include them as early as possible if you want to reduce the cost, because a lot of CTOs think that it's way too expensive to include a QA at all or early on, but it's the other way around actually. So, and also, as I already said, we can help build confidence in a product when going live, but we cannot help build a perfect product with no issues.